Hi, I'm Joe Polizzi, and this is the Content Inc. podcast. 5 minutes every Monday for content creators who desire to be content entrepreneurs. All right, I want you to do something for me. Think about the most respected and trustworthy leaders in your industry. I bet they published a book. Whether you already have the content prepared or you're starting from scratch, getting your expertise into a printed book with Lulu has never been easier and more profitable. Lulu's e-commerce plugins allow you to sell directly to your fans from your site while they handle all the printing and shipping and everything else. You keep creative control, customer data, and 100% of your profits. 100%, folks. Create a free account today at lulu.com. A few weeks back, my friend and amazing content entrepreneur, Jay Clouse, was a guest in my private NFT community. The interview went about an hour long, but I've pulled out 20 minutes of this interview where Jay really digs deep into his content creator business model. It's really fascinating, and I believe you'll find a ton of value. So, without further ado, founder of Creator Science, Jay Clouse. Everyone in this community right now is an NFT member. They purchased an NFT. We have 70 in the total group. We get together every 2 months now, and they get all access to everything, as you know, from last year being at the event. They get into the VIP, and they'll get to go to your workshop if they want to. And we get together early on Sunday to have drinks and fellowship and all that kind of stuff. And then we're working on a collaborative book project similar to what you've probably seen Mark Schaefer do the same thing. We're doing something, but just focused on this concept of the content entrepreneur. So I'm sure they have questions for you, and we'll get to those in a second, but luckily I get to ask my questions first. First thing I wanted to ask you is, I saw the announcement of the rebrand over to Everything Creator Science. If I'm correct, you renamed your podcast, which is called Creative Elements. Creator Science. Seems like everything is aligned under that brand. Can you talk a little bit about your decision and why, and maybe the strategy behind moving everything to that brand?
Yes. Okay. So let's go back in time even a little bit further. So I've been writing a newsletter since 2017. And back in that time, I didn't know what I wanted to write about. I was just like young, ambitious guy who wanted to write about being a young, ambitious guy. And over time, things have gotten more in the realm of creators, especially as that term has become more generally used and accepted. So there was a period of time when, at the beginning, my newsletter was called Work in Progress. And then I was like, let's rename this. I did a rebranding project. And I was going to rebrand it The Infinite Creator, because I was really interested in this idea of playing an infinite game. Did the whole project, got the designs done, had it all out there, and I realized, I should Google this just to make sure no one else is using this name. What I came to realize is the term infinite creator is widely used in like a Christian sense to refer to God. And I thought, that's not going to work for me. I need to change. And very quickly, I just kind of dialed in on some new name called Creative Companion. I thought, I want to be a companion on your creative journey. And I liked that. Felt warm, felt inviting, but I wasn't getting the traction that I wanted to when I would poll my audience to say, what type of words do you associate with me and my work? They wouldn't say the word creator. And that was frustrating to me. So last August, I completed yet another branding project to name the newsletter Creator Science. This idea that I'm going to analytically look at what successful creators are doing so that I can pass on those learnings to help other people do the same. There's like some natural tension in the name. This idea of creator plus science has like this left brain, right brain kind of tension in it. And I really liked it. And there was a night and day difference in how my work was received and shared and how I was regarded in the creator economy and in those circles. And I just thought, wow, this is awesome. And actually, I was really afraid of that rebrand. I already had a community. It was called the Creative Companion Club. Terry was a member of it. I reached out to the group and said, I think about rebranding. And it was scary. And people were not bought in on the name. but I thought this is the right move, and it proved to be the right move. There's a whole article I wrote about that process. In tandem, in 2020, I had launched a podcast called Creative Elements. March of 2020. Interesting time to launch anything, March of 2020. But that podcast has been successful. It's been good, but it's been challenging to market a newsletter called Creator Science, a podcast called Creative Elements. People would say Jay's the founder of Creative Science or Creator Elements. Like there was just so much mix up and it was confusing, even though they're fairly similar. So as painful as renaming things is, I decided yet again to do this so that everything is under the Creator Science brand. Now the podcast, as of yesterday, is also named Creator Science. And I feel so much lighter to have one project, one thing to be associated with, even though there are multiple media properties underneath that. You have the newsletter, you have the podcast, you have the YouTube channel. It's all Creator Science. Jay is the founder of Creator Science. Put it to bed. That's all that matters.
Good. No, perfect. I was wondering, you talk on your website, your Jay Clouse website, you talk about the creator brand itself. How do you treat the differentiation between Jay Clouse personal brand and this unified, let's say, creator brand? And then my follow-up question is do you actually have an exit strategy in mind, knowing that Jay Clouse will go on forever, but at some point you could theoretically, strategically sell that asset off, the creator brand asset?
I like the optionality of that. That is intentional. But the reason that I went with a project name as opposed to my personal name for the work that I'm doing is I think that there's just a level of legitimacy that follows having this third party entity, brand, media company that you're building. It does give the optionality for an exit strategy as well. I don't know how practical that is. In the current setup, it's not, because I make all of the content. But there is a world where that brand is well known and I start building processes where other people are creating some of the content, and that becomes a saleable asset. I know that, my name has some value to it now as well in certain circles, but I really want to lean on the name of the project and the brand more than anything else. Like at CEX, I hope that I'm introduced as Jay is the founder of Creator Science, and we talk about what Creator Science is. My personal handles on social media are my name, because I think people want to follow people on social media, but the first line of those bios is about Creator Science. So that's how I'm thinking about it. I think I, as an individual, am discoverable, but I hope that the attention that I draw to myself, I quickly deflect over to the Creator Science brand. Now I don't have to try to deflect it in two directions, towards a newsletter over here named one thing and a podcast over here named another.
No, I'm sure it's less energy or a better focus for you. You're just like, before you probably felt a little bit all over the place, and now you feel, okay, I've got this direction, make it just make it easier for everyone else. Right.
And also, I mean, this remains to be seen, but I really can't overstate how big of a difference the Creator Science brand made for my writing. Like I just got a much better response from the market. And I think the same will be true on the podcast. I think it'll be easier for me to market that podcast in cross promos and ads and things, because I think it's more aligned with what the content actually is. And it's also more on trend. Having the word creator in the name, I think, is a really positive thing for what I'm trying to build in the creator space.
Well, and it's I'm assuming a clear differentiation at the same time, whereas nothing wrong with elements, but doesn't necessarily speak to the science part. And you're looking at everything from, yes, the creation standpoint, and there's also the soft skills, and you talk about that as well. But now you're like, I'm really trying to figure this thing out from a hypothesis standpoint, more of a scientific method.
I really maybe even over-index on language. I think that language and word choice is so important. I think design in all uses of the word is important. I think language and word choices are design choices. Using the word creative in the former name of the podcast, Creative Elements, or Creative Companion in my newsletter, that appeals to somebody who holds the identity as a creative, which is not necessarily the same as someone who identifies as a creator. A creative is more of a focus on craft and artistry and the style of work you're doing, but often that's like in-house with a creative team. And creator speaks more to a business model. And the content that I create is much more aligned with the business model, the entrepreneur, the content creator side of things. So I think I was subtly, marketing the podcast to the wrong person who then had a negative first impression potentially, and not marketing to the right person who never took the opportunity to have a first impression in the first place.
You had something interesting. I sent you an email on this. I wanted to talk about it. You were talking about consistency. And as you know my stuff, and I'm always about, you have to be consistent. You want the minimal amount of content for the maximum amount of results, but whatever you decide that you can release in excellence and be the differentiator, you do so consistently. You sort of were, you're asking yourself the question, do you have to be consistent? So I'm going to give you the floor. You just explored the question. What are you finding out when it comes to consistency?
It's a really nuanced conversation, is the headline, because the advice isn't bad. The advice isn't wrong. But when people say to be consistent, I think that advice is heard incorrectly a lot of times. I think people hear that as you need to be constant, you have to be publishing at least every week, maybe even every day. And that's what we think consistency is. Consistency applies to a lot of things. It applies to a schedule. Yes, if you set a schedule and say, I'm going to publish on this cadence, you want to follow through on that, because when you follow through, that's consistent with the promise that you're making. You want to consistently be delivering a good experience. You want people to think that, hey, every time that I tune into Jay or listen to what he's saying or check out his stuff, that's worthwhile. That's consistency in a way. You want to be consistent as a person, meaning when you show up to a call like this or on a podcast or on YouTube, you want the experience of people spending time with you to be similar, congruent. If I come here and act some way, but then you hear me on a Barstool Sports podcast being a jerk, that's not good. And you don't want to do that inside of your own content either. So consistency is good. It's helpful. But I see a lot of people think consistency is being as prolific as a Gary Vee or an Alex Hormozi. And if you are publishing too frequently to create a consistently good experience, then that's a negative overall thing. I think we're living in a noisier and noisier world. You have to earn the right to keep people's attention. There's some minimum amount of showing up and following through that you have to do so people give you any attention at all. But when you have people's attention, it's more important that you honor it and value it and treat it well and give them a good experience than it is to show up every single day.
So if you were to give advice, I would say a good half of the people on this call are more at the beginner stages of their content creation journey. And you don't necessarily have to talk to consistency, but you can. What would be your advice? I mean, I've seen you've been sharing pretty open about the fact that you've been making significantly more dollars year after year, the last 2 years especially. You've sort of gone through the trenches starting in 17 and you made it through the tough points. And now you feel like you've got some real momentum. Take yourself back to when you started. What would be your advice right now for everybody getting started? Would it be what the Justin Welsh, focus on one platform? Is it all about focus and differentiation?
I think focus is powerful because here's how I'd put it. You want to be good at this game. Think about being in school. And if you wanted to be a straight A student, would it be easier to be a straight A student when you're only taking one class or when you're taking 5 classes? It's possible to be a straight A student in 5 classes at once, but it's way harder. And you have to be a student of every platform you are creating on so you can make work that stands out and is remarkable and shareable. So I do think that focus is one of your greatest assets in the beginning, because if you can be a student of one platform and be really good on it, it's going to be much easier to port over an engaged, happy audience from one platform to another. I started trying to do too many platforms too quickly. And now because I've made a promise that I'm going to show up on those places, I feel the pressure to maintain that across all those platforms. Whereas if I would have just had some restraint in the beginning and said, I'm a writer, I'm going to do Twitter. I'm going to do Twitter really well. I'm going to do email. I'm not going to do audio. I'm not going to do Instagram. I'm not going to do YouTube. I'm just going to do this thing really well. And when that grows, I can move people over. That's the playbook that we see high growth creators doing over and over again. Sahil Bloom's done it. Justin's done it. It's just easier to take a large audience from one platform and then kickstart from zero on another and add slowly. That would be my advice for sure.
Hindsight's 2020, can't go back. But if we could, you're starting today, what would you do?
I would I would have email as part of my strategy. Still going to have email as part of my strategy because to me, email is like this valuable asset that really de-risks your business across third-party discovery platforms changing their rules or getting bought by a billionaire and going to zero. So I would build an email list and I would focus on one discovery platform or one discovery style. We're in an interesting time where short form vertical video can be used across several different platforms pretty effectively, actually. So if you have email in place and then you are predominantly a writer, I would focus on Twitter. I would just really go into Twitter because Twitter can actually eventually spawn off well into LinkedIn. It can be captured into carousels on different platforms visually. Twitter is a really good starting point, but the ethos is one discovery platform, whether it's writing, which I would think Twitter/LinkedIn, short form video, which I would think Instagram, TikTok, YouTube Shorts, or long form video, YouTube. I think YouTube probably has the most upside of those discovery platforms, but it's probably also like the hardest because there's so much that goes into doing long form video well. So me personally, if I was starting today from zero, I would do email, I would do Twitter. That's probably where I'd be. Audio podcasting, it's really hard. It's not an audio building medium. It's great for deepening relationships with an audience you already have. And it can really be like a trust accelerant in that way. But if I'm getting into podcasting, I'm thinking YouTube first.
And when did you start your YouTube channel? It was recent, wasn't it? That you dedicated time to it?
First video went live July last year.
Okay. And results?
Slower than I would hope, and we're taking it really seriously. YouTube is trying to get more into the podcasting game. I haven't seen the effect of their public emphasis play through in my personal experience. I think podcasting is a difficult medium on YouTube because the default YouTube viewer behavior is not, I'm going to get recommended a 60-minute video and watch all of it. We've started doing solo videos with me that have been performing better. Not a surprise. But the upside of doing the podcasting thing is the average view duration you have when you have a 60-minute video can be 12 to 20 minutes often. And that's a long time you're keeping people on YouTube, which YouTube likes. Whereas this video I posted this week on YouTube is a solo video. It's about 7 minutes long. We kept the average viewer for 48% of that video, but that's 3 minutes. That's not keeping people on YouTube for as long as the interviews. So it's interesting. I enjoy it. I see a huge upside in it, and I'm going to continue to invest in it, but I put way more money into it than I've gotten out of it. And that's a position I can take now that I'm generating revenue elsewhere. It'd be difficult in the beginning because I would have to be editing things myself, probably. I have to be designing thumbnails myself, probably. Whereas now I've hired an editor, I've hired a couple of really talented thumbnail designers, and an audio engineer. So I feel like it's a long-term investment, but we're almost a year in, and it's probably going to be in the what's the expression, in the red for another year at least.
You mentioned your team. Do you have any full-time employees besides yourself? Is there all contractors? And give everyone an idea of what your business model looks like from that standpoint.
Yeah, I have a team. Nobody full-time W-2. I did just change the infrastructure of my business where I'm a W-2 employee of my company, and that's really nice. But everybody is contract. I have a basically full-time video editor. I have what I would call a research assistant part-time, mostly on the YouTube side. I have 2 contract thumbnail designers, have a contract audio engineer, and, I outsource accounting. I outsource any legal work that I have, but it's mostly on the YouTube side at this point. It's mostly video and audio engineering and thumbnail help.
So long-term play on YouTube, you feel confident that that's going to be in the next year or two, it's going to pay off for you.
It's a huge market opportunity. Like YouTube comes pre-installed on every Android device that's out there. Building the skills to be good on YouTube, those are so portable. Like not only can you repurpose good long form video into short form video, take the ideas inherent, turn that into blog posts or a solo audio episode or social media content. Like it's just the highest level asset you can create that breaks apart into anything else that you want to make. Makes you a better speaker. But yeah, it's just a huge market opportunity long-term on YouTube.
But again, I think for everyone, the point that you made, Jay, is that you built your platform somewhere else. And then now you're investing in taking the time and being patient with YouTube, which is much more difficult. And Roberto Blake says it all the time too. Comes out and says, oh my God, YouTube, everyone should have a YouTube channel. And then you realize that he's been 5-6 years really pouring his guts into that channel. And now it's starting to be a payoff for him.
Yeah. And, I don't even think that my audience on other platforms has really ported over to be like the base of what's there on YouTube. I think 90% of my YouTube audience is new audience, which is a good thing. And it's interesting because at this scale, I can meaningfully impact the view curve on a video by sending an email out to my audience. Say like, hey, I just put out a video and then suddenly I can, double the views I have on a video. That doesn't actually help in the eyes of the YouTube algorithm. It helps the outward public metrics of views. That's the hard thing about YouTube in the beginning is you are fighting against heuristics and assumptions because there's no hiding on YouTube on how successful a video is. Like people see the number of views you have on it. They see how many subscribers you have. And with so much available great video content on YouTube, people will look at a video, say, that only has 900 views. It's probably not very good. That's an assumption they'll have, and they might not click play in the first place. And now that goes against your click-through rate in the YouTube metrics because they served it up to a viewer who decided not to click. And you got to fight uphill against that for some time. We're still waiting on some video to like hit. We hear this from YouTube creators all the time on the podcast. They'll have some video that just moonshots. And if they already have an existing YouTube video catalog, it has a downward impact on people looking at those videos. Some of those will take off and the flywheel can start turning really quickly when one video does well. We haven't had that moment yet. And, I am betting that we will have that moment. That's part of the investment in the channel, but who knows when that will happen and how much I'll be in for on the channel before it does happen.
I hope you enjoyed this interview with Jay. I believe Jay's insights on focus really hit home. Sure, you can get straight A's in all your subjects, as Jay was saying, but it's really difficult to do this as a creator. The better path is to get an A+ in one of them and know that channel inside and out. Jay will be giving 2 speeches and an amazing 3-hour workshop at Creator Economy Expo, May 1st through 3rd on this topic. And we'll be talking about how to use science and data to become a better, more successful content creator. Go to cex.events to sign up, and you only have a couple weeks to do so move fast. I hope to see you there. Until then, please, if you would, rate this show on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you're listening to this thing at. Share it with your friends. It makes a big difference. I'll talk to you next Monday.